We have, with our next speaker, we have the enormous privilege of having Parker Lewis with us this morning. Mr. Parker Lewis received a degree in economics from Duke University before serving on the investment team at Heyman Capital, a global macro hedge fund. He worked with Unchained Capital as the head of business development and now works in that same role with Zapright, a Bitcoin payment processor that we're using to process Bitcoin payments over there in the merch store right now. He's perhaps best known for a series of essays that he recently turned into a beautiful book published by Dina Moose's Safe House publishing house called Gradually Then Suddenly. Parker is the unofficial mayor of Austin, Texas, and one of the most respected voices in articulating the value proposition, logic, and trajectory of Bitcoin. He's going to be out there signing books. If you want to go buy those over there, please welcome Parker Lewis.
Actually, all right, great to be here. So the title of my talk is Why Bitcoin Wins, but before I get started, I just want to clarify, articulate that while I work and live my life every day with the view that Bitcoin is inevitable or increasingly inevitable, that should not be, and anything that I talk about today should not be confused with hubris. That my perspective is that everything's always at risk and complacency is the enemy of agency, and that we have to manifest and build the future that we want. But I'll talk about a lot of the fundamental reasons why Bitcoin is winning and will win in the end. First, the overarching idea is that the world needs sound money. Sound money is a necessity to everyday life. Thinking about, like, you do not get clean water to show up to your house, power, air conditioning, modern medicine, food at the grocery store. None of that exists without the coordination function of sound money, and that our legacy money is broken and it's increasingly fragile, and all the things that we take for granted are very much at risk, and that humans benefit from trade and specialization. We need sound money like we need water to survive, and this question of Bitcoin would be a turtles all the way down problem if not for the fact that we need sound money. And so I'll talk about specific reasons why Bitcoin's winning, but always have in the back of your minds this, that Bitcoin will win because humans need Bitcoin to win, and that we are manifesting what's required to go forward and prosper. So I'll break this up into a few different segments: the practical reality, the fundamental reality, the systemic reality, and then also the human reality. Practical reality of why Bitcoin's winning and will win is because of its fixed supply. If Bitcoin credibly fixes its fixed supply, it will win. It will emerge as the global reserve currency, and it is a causal relationship because what it represents is a form of money that can't be printed, and everyone needs it, and everyone in the world has an incentive to protect it as they figure it out. So what I'm demonstrating here, for those of you guys who are not familiar, is that this is Bitcoin's cumulative fixed supply over time, as well as the bars are the amount of Bitcoin issued. Every 4 years, the rate of issuance gets cut in half until in 2140 there will be no more Bitcoin issued. What it represents, again, at the end of the day, is simply a form of money that can't be printed, and 8 billion people in the world all need that. This is the competition, and Bitcoin will win because its competition is weak. It is the dollar, and there's a Texan proverb popularized by George H.W. Bush, which is, if you fool me, can't get fooled again. And that the real saying is, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. But when it comes to the money printing, it's really fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, 4 times, 5 times, shame on me. What I'm showing here on this slide is all of the different episodes at mass scale of money printing since the Great Financial Crisis. So QE1, QE2, QE3, those cumulatively were over the period of 2009 to 2014, and the Federal Reserve created $3.6 trillion new dollars out of thin air. Recognize that $1 trillion is a number that's too big for you to really conceptualize in your daily life. You just can't do it. Our government throws it around like trillion-dollar deficits and increasing the debt of our country by $2 trillion a year, but there's nothing that you can actually quantify that signals that that is $1 trillion. It's a massive amount, and it causes economic chaos. In 2020, after the government lockdown, the Federal Reserve created $5 trillion new dollars. QE is forever, and so when we think about practically why Bitcoin will win, it can credibly enforce its fixed supply of 21 million. Everyone in the world needs sound money. Everyone in the world will demand a form of money that can't be printed, and its competition is fiat currency that gets printed time after time after time and ultimately steals our time. So now, the fundamental reality. I'm going to go into a little bit of the concepts without going too deep down. So when I talk about Bitcoin's fixed supply, that is the most important thing that I want people to take away. All fundamental value derives from Bitcoin's fixed supply and its ability to credibly enforce it without the need for trust. There's two fundamental economic concepts wrapped up there. It is, the first one, money and economic systems converge to one. Systems converge on one form of money for the reason that the problem it's solving is one of money, and the nature of money dictates that I have to have the form of money that you're willing to accept. We have to have a consensus. It's an objective evaluation of different goods in the market, but it is an intersubjective problem. So if I have to have the form of money that you're willing to accept, then part of your intersubjective evaluation is what is the next person going to accept, and it translates out identically to all 8 billion people. That is entirely independent of Bitcoin, but there's a fundamental economic fact that money converges one due to the problem of trade. Second is that there is a best form of money, and it is the form of money that can't be printed. The way to think about this is if you could opt into a form of money that increased at a rate of 5% a year, that would be worse than one that could increase at 4% a year, which would be worse than 3%, which would be worse than 2%, which would be worse than 1%. But the best you can possibly do is one that simply doesn't increase. It's even better than one that decreases. And so if you come to the conclusion that money does converge to one, again, thinking about it entirely independent of Bitcoin given the nature that it solves, then the question is, well, the world's going to converge on a form of money. Now, is it Bitcoin? And if Bitcoin really is a form of money that can't be printed, then it becomes very logical that the world is converging on it for that reason. This idea of convergence to one typically trips people up. So the way I help people understand that is that economic systems converge on one form of money by necessity, not chance. It's not, oftentimes when people ask what money is, they'll say it's a collective hallucination or a belief system. It's none of those things. I'll talk about this later, but you cannot believe that humans are both rational and hallucinating about money. Humans are rational, and they adopt the best forms of money in order to trade and better their lives, and they need it to survive. Think about one example, which is a macro example, another, which is a micro example. The macro example is that the world previously converged on one form of money, and that was gold. And you might not need to understand why the world converged on gold. You can. I talk about it in my book. But the important thing to just accept is that it happened. And it happened over thousands of years. And again, the question is why, and is it by coincidence? It's not by coincidence. It's for very rational reasons. The micro example is to think about yourselves in your local communities. Everyone accepts one form of money. Now they're in the process of shifting over to Bitcoin, but functionally speaking, all local economies only interact with one form of money. 99.9% of individuals and businesses only trade in one form of money on a daily basis. A few large multinational corporations will trade in multiple currencies, but 99.9% of people all go around every transaction, every day, one currency. The question is why, and is it by coincidence? It's not by coincidence. It's because money converges to one because it's solving the problem of trade and exchange, and we have to agree and have a consensus on what that form of money is in order to be able to trade and get those benefits. So the world is converging on Bitcoin fundamentally because it is finitely scarce, that fixed supply of 21 million, which is credibly enforced, and I'll talk about that next. It is easy to divide and aggregate, and that's important because you need to be able to have one common good that can measure things large and small. but also be able to transfer value in quantities that are large and small, bottle of water or buying a house or selling a business. And that Bitcoin is transferable over a communication channel. This is the trifecta. It is that Bitcoin combines this never-before property of finite scarcity with the ability to transfer a finitely scarce asset literally over the internet or a text message or radio. So now the systematic reality, that's the fundamental reality. Money converges to one and is converging on Bitcoin because it has a fixed supply and it has these important properties of money that can be divided and aggregated and transferred very easily. But at the core of it, the question is, well, is it actually credible? Can it actually credibly enforce its fixed supply? And this is why Bitcoin will win systematically. Bitcoin will win because of its governance structure. It is a beautiful system of checks and balances, and there's a decentralized consensus mechanism where everyone is enforcing the rules against each other. Anybody who opts into Bitcoin is voluntarily opting in because they see the value of a form of money that can't be printed. And I'm talking about the people that opt in that have actually found the signal, not people that are day trading because they don't. Two things can exist at the same time. People can understand and find the true signal, and people cannot, but the people that find the signal are right. So first and foremost, it is the system design. It's not a coincidence. There's a lot underneath the hood. But at its root, it is this idea of contradicting powers and gridlock by design. Basically, that Bitcoin is designed to be very difficult to change. The incentives are aligned and enforced by the currency. Again, everyone has this aligned and common interest of a form of money that can't be printed. They opt in for that reason. No one has the incentive to allow somebody else to print money, and everyone is enforcing the rules against each other. But very importantly, this system, none of it would work if also by design at its root level, if Bitcoin were not permissionless. So everyone can access the system, which allows for everyone and anyone to enforce the rule. And at the end, this system that is difficult to change is not just difficult to change for the reason of being difficult to change. It's important to protect the integrity of the system, particularly that fixed supply. What it ensures is that the rules cannot change arbitrarily. When I showed you that slide of the dollar printing, that is the rules changing arbitrarily at no cost and by functionally 12 people that sit in large banks with a lot of security all over the country. Bitcoin is valuable because its rules cannot change arbitrarily, and the most important one is permissionless, and there's a fixed supply and no one can do anything about it. So when you think about the separation of powers, think about private keys, that is ultimately public and private key cryptography. It's how people actually hold Bitcoin. Every last Bitcoin is controlled by a cryptographic private key. You can hold that, or you can trust somebody else to hold it for you, but it controls the economic power of the network. Bitcoin nodes, anybody can run a Bitcoin node. Just think about a node as a computer. It's enforcing the rules of Bitcoin. It's basically validating all other currency transactions. It is ensuring and enforcing the rules that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin, and you can only spend the money that you have once, and if you do, then you got to earn more and deliver value to other human beings. But it also provides permissionless access to the network. Nodes are how all Bitcoin transactions get broadcast and why they can be done, if you want to, on a permissionless basis. And then the mining function, the triumvirate. It anchors Bitcoin's security in the real world. While Bitcoin is natively digital, its security is very physical, requires real-world power, about 20 to 25 gigawatts of power securing the Bitcoin network, and growing 24/7. The output, the input is the system design. The output is that it's difficult to change. It's global and permissionless, it's borderless, it's censorship resistant, and it's money that can't be printed. Now, the monetary reality. So we've gone through the fundamental reality, the economic principles that are dictating why the world is converging on one form of money and why it would be Bitcoin. We've talked about the system, because if I say that Bitcoin wins if it credibly enforces its fixed supply, the most important word is credibly, and it's the system structure that dictates that it is credible, and it's why that it is trustless and that we don't have to trust any individual. But coming back kind of up a level to this monetary reality, As the market converges on Bitcoin, and think about it as each individual mind, each individual family, each individual business, then community, then state, nationality, liquidity begets liquidity. So think about convergence as accelerating. When I talk about Bitcoin's security function, as Bitcoin gets larger, think about it as 1 million people growing to 10 million people, growing to 100 million people to 1 billion people. Its security model is not static. Increasing decentralization results in increasing security. The rules get harder and harder to change, which means its fixed supply gets more and more credible. As that happens, greater security, greater integrity, greater mind share. Imagine 10 times the number of people working on Bitcoin and developing the tools. You get better tools, you get greater utility. You're going to increasingly see your grocery stores accepting Bitcoin as payment, your mechanics accepting Bitcoin as payment. Every business, first an individual has to understand why Bitcoin stores value, then they turn around and say, pay me in Bitcoin. And that this is going to happen gradually and suddenly. When I talk about this, it is like people search for the people that are curious search for the answers in Bitcoin, but it's not obvious. It's difficult to see, but then something will happen and that mind will open up to the idea. From that point for them, that is the sudden point. But while today in this early day of Bitcoin, while people really do have to consciously think about these type of dilemmas, it's probably not more than 1 in 20. Once 1 in 20 people figure this out, the other 19 are going to have to immediately adopt it. It's like the crowded movie theater that once there is an obvious consensus, which realistically is only 1 in 20 people because it's the people that have the most knowledge and the most stored value to protect, that there will be rapid monetization. And that while Bitcoin is nascent today and volatile, albeit it is material, storing over $1 trillion in value, that as Bitcoin emerges as the clear and dominant form of global money, there are certain emergent properties that will follow, which are stability of value, trade and exchange every day. Bitcoin will be used to facilitate virtually everything that you need to consume in your daily life: ribeyes, gas, medicine, power, whatever you need to produce in your business, and it will ultimately be the unit of count. Things will be priced in Bitcoin. Now the human reality. This is the last slide. I think it got cut off there a little bit at the end, but coming back to this idea that Bitcoin will win because of human reality, because humans are rational, and because they need Bitcoin to succeed, which is not a circular dilemma. It is just like if you need a door for your house, you are going to build a door and fix it. We have a broken form of money. Some people that were particularly high agency before us identified that problem and came up with a solution, and now everyone in the world has an incentive to protect it. So Bitcoin is perfectly aligned with human interests. Humans are rational. Bitcoin is an honest system of weights and measures, the most honest. It is a fair, equitable, and moral system. And when I talk about it being a moral system, opting in means ceding yourself the ability to print money. Now, there are people in our society that are closer to the spigot that benefit and have this inherent conflict of interest. But if you are voluntarily opting into Bitcoin, you are voluntarily ceding the ability to print money. And everyone has the incentive commonly to enforce the rules. In addition to that, think about the nature of the people that see this enormity of the problem of our money being broken and don't shirk from the responsibility. The highest of agency people in our society are the people that build the Bitcoin network, and the next wave of people that figure it out are going to be the next and the next and the next. And when you live in a world, and this is the most important part, if you live in a world where there's a fixed money supply, you have an incentive to deliver value to others. In a world where the money gets debased, you actually have an incentive to make money, not deliver values. It's an entirely different incentive structure. It might be increasing by a few percentage a year and declining by a few percentage a year, but if you flip that ledger and you're living in a world where money is appreciating, you actually have an incentive to deliver value. And this idea, and it is deeply moral, that if you think about a world, because in the legacy world, you can get money one of two ways. You can either deliver value to another human being, or the Fed can bail you out and you can get a second bite of the apple. Versus in Bitcoin, with a fixed supply, the only way to get Bitcoin is to deliver value to another human being. And what that also means is that you have an incentive to produce more than you consume. And that is incredibly good and moral to say, if I have savings, that means in an honest system of weights and measures, that means I've actually delivered more value than I've consumed others, and there's not a lot more in serving your other man that you can do that's more honest than that. So why Bitcoin will win? The people's need for it, and how Bitcoin perfectly aligns societal interests, but at a root level, everything will come down to that fixed supply. So want to thank you. Really glad to be here today. I'm going to be signing books. We're running a little behind the schedule, so I was going to do Q&A, but I've got copies of my book, Gradually Then Suddenly, where I talk about all these ideas in more detail, and happy to chat and answer questions in the back during the break, so please come find me.